Greetings, everyone. Today is a very dark day outside, but it's light in my heart, and I want to share with you. It is the 9th of October, 2017. Here before you, you see a picture that was taken 2 days ago. Not the picture of me, that was taken about 5 days ago, but the picture of the land, and you see in the distance a ziggurat, that little orangey yellow things up on the hill that's sort of a spiral tower. This is the location, the place that the picture was taken from, where I completed a mission that was given to me when I first arrived here this time in February of this year, after an absence of 17 years from the Crestone, Opah area, where I lived for 7 years prior to that. And when I returned this time, I was given the transmission from the Thoth Extreme that before the snows set in, I was to find a place within the circumference, within the radius that radiates out from the Ziggurat Tor Hill, not Tor Hill, sorry, the Ziggurat Hill. It is correct, connected to the Tor, and that's why I made that mistake. And to dig a hole with some companions and bury some crystals and some other things. Well, I didn't know what, I was given no more information, so I wasn't really very inspired. I had a lot of other things on my plate, and time passed. We finally went out about, 2 months ago. William Bueller, Edie Cooper, and I drove around to find a spot, and we found the spot that was acceptable just within the radius of this energy whirl that is developed right there with the ziggurat and spreads outward on all sides as a sort of a whirl around it. So we found the spot. We knew where it was, but we still didn't do anything. And time passed and time passed. And then Edie received the other day, we need to do this. She got a really strong signal. She tapped me on the shoulder about it, and I went, whoa, yes. Well, I still didn't have any real information. So I went to Thoth and I said, okay, we're going to do it, but I need to know what this is about. I understand that it's sort of the node is a natural node there, but we're to intentionalize that node, and we're to create a new format within it. But that's about all I know. So it was then that I received that this was connected to the Opah and the seals that were buried Mount Haleakala on Maui during the time of the Venus transit in 2004, when Simeon, Nartumit, and I, then my husband, had moved there for many purposes. And one of the first things we did was to orchestrate this particular event of the burying of the seals. Now, what are these seals and the whole story? I'm going to tell you in just a moment. But we're going to look at the ziggurat and a few other things first. So 2 days ago, on what would that be? That would be the 7th. We went out to this location. I say we, William Bueller, Edie Cooper, myself, and several other people, most of whom are part of William and Edie's synergy group, which has been gathering in this region for many, many, many years, probably as many as I've been gone and more, and have been working with the energetics, not just of this area, but of the entire planet. So they built up a really strong synergic light field. So anyway, a small group of us, several couldn't come that wanted to, but it just didn't work for them on that day. So a small group of us came and did the burial and the ceremony. So before I get to the meaning of this and the Opah and the seals and the whole thing with Haleakala, we're going to take a trip back in time. But first, I want to tell you just a little bit more about the ziggurat. So here you see a picture of the ziggurat that I found on the web, so you can see it closer. And it is really an incredible place. I've climbed it many times, many years ago. Unfortunately, I'm not able to do so now physically. However, I think there is a path that I could probably get up with some help, and that's for a future mission that I wish to accomplish. So in any case, I wish to read to you from the Crestone eagle I found on the web a little bit about the pyramid, the history of the ziggurat, the history of it, and some of the things about a ziggurat in general, because I think this is important in understanding the energy we're working with here. First of all, I will say that the three most important energy points that Thoth has revealed to me thus far within the San Luis Valley is the crest in the stone mountain, Mount Challenger, that contains, in a slightly offset dimension, but not full dimension, different dimension, just slightly offset, it contains the Thoth retreat, one of two on the planet. The other is beneath Lake Titicaca in Peru. It contains the sacred On. It's the final thresholding chamber for the sacred On, which was brought into this location for its final place about 4 years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago. And there are other things, but those are the two major ones. And of course, this whole area here is the crown chakra of the Ascension Temple. So we have the crest in the stone mountain with its attendant things inside it. Then we have this node here, the ziggurat, and the hill it's on, and the whirl around it. And we have the sand dunes, which contains many things, portals, but mostly this huge golden sun disk underneath it. And when I say big, I mean big. And there is a pyramid, and there's other things underneath the dunes. The dunes were created through a time display, implosion, and weren't just a natural result of sand building up. And if you read about people trying to explain the sand dunes from a geological perspective, they really hum and haw. I mean, it's like, oh yeah, well, it had to be created. We're not by sand, just wearing down. We're not exactly sure. It's awfully big. So they even are kind of wishy-washy on the whole thing. So anyway, these are the three major places that I know of at this time in the San Luis Valley. This particular node with the ziggurat connects portal-wise to the Tor Hill in Glastonbury, to the Magdalen Tower, Rennes-le-Chateau, and other places. Thoth has always said, and other places. So I don't know the other places yet, but those two for sure. So now I'm going to read to you from the Crestone Eagle article. A ziggurat, by definition, is a rectangular stepped tower. The first of these temple structures we know about were erected by the ancient Sumerians who lived on the rich floodplain beneath the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in what is now Iraq. The Sumerians first appeared on the floodplain around 4000 BCE. The earliest of these tower structures appeared about the end of the 3rd millennium BCE. The purpose of a ziggurat is to get people closer to heaven, the sky, home of the gods. In fact, the ancient Mesopotamians believed a ziggurat connected heaven to earth. Well, it connects heaven to earth because almost all ziggurats were placed accordingly so that they could pull the energies connective between the spheres, between the energy vortices, and create portals and connections to star portals as well, both earth and star. He goes on to say that they're traditionally fashioned from mud bricks dried in the sun, but this one, the Crestone one, is created from concrete. They have an outside staircase winding to the summit of the tower. Each Sumerian city had a ziggurat as part of its temple complex. Priests performed sacred ceremonies and rites on the ziggurat. Scholars have found evidence pointing to the use of the ziggurat for a sacred marriage between the king and his consort with the gods. This added divine power to the royal couple. And then we talk about this Crestone ziggurat. The article that I'm reading you says, the Crestone ziggurat was commissioned by Najid Halabi, father of Queen Noor of Jordan. Halabi bought the land the ziggurat occupies from Hannah and Maurice Strong after they bought the Baca Grande from AZL Resources Incorporated in 1978. Halabi, who also built a home nearby, constructed the ziggurat for private prayer and meditation. At the time, Maurice Strong, the first chief of the United Nations Environmental Program, said he saw the Baca Grande as an attempt to harmonize the people who affect the environment. The Strong family continues to work hard to make the area a spiritual peace center, honoring all paths to the divine to promote peace and understanding. Halabi, an American of Syrian Christian descent, was born in Dallas, Texas, December 10, 1628. He goes on to say he graduated from Yale Law School, and in the early 1960s, President Kennedy appointed Halabi head of the Federal Aviation Agency. And it goes on with his history. And then he says he married 3 times, and Halabi's daughter Lisa, who was planned as an urban planner, became Queen Noor of Jordan. And it goes on about that. And then it says, in recent decades, the Crestone ziggurat has continued as a site for private prayer. So now I found this video taken by a drone moving around the ziggurat. This gives you kind of a feel of the land, the terrain, and the energy of it all. I noticed that it's been repaired greatly since I've been there because it was cracking and the paint was kind of crumbling. It's been repaired and I would believe repainted since then. And I'm glad to see it's being kept up. And there's a little road going down there, as you can see, and that's the one I want to re-find because I know it's here somewhere. I just haven't found it yet. I think I can get up there if I can find that road. But anyway, I just thought this was quite an amazing little drone tour of the whole thing. So what you see before you is a miniaturized picture of the Opah seals. These I drew by hand and many years ago, and I'm going to read you what I wrote about it in 2004, 2004, so you can understand the bigger picture. Sorry about the paper rustling. On June 7th, 2004, day before the actual Venus transit, yet in the light shadow of that transit, in a sacred process at the Haleakala crater on Maui, we buried 12 small folded sheets of handmade paper containing sacred words that were sealed with wax at the foot of Mount Sinai in the Sinai Desert in 1989. The imprint in the wax and seals of these 12 papers is from a silver seal which I had crafted in 1976 in Carmel, California, at the request of my mentor, Thoth Racemus, that's Thoth Ra. I was told at the time that the silver seal would eventually be buried. So time passed. It was a beautiful seal too, so my heart kind of fell after I had that seal in my hands because it was like a necklace and you could wear it. And it was gorgeous that I had to put it away, not look at it again, or not, do anything with it. And then at some future date, bury it. But I did what I was asked and I put it away. And then in 1989, I entrusted the seal to a spiritual colleague, Estrella, who took it with her on a sacred journey to seal the papers at Sinai with the silver seal and then bury that seal in the desert there. Thoth requested that I keep the returned sealed papers for a future time. That time arrived on June 7th, 2004. Along with the sealed papers, several small stones were buried at Haleakala, one of them from the site of Masada in the Dead Sea region of Israel. The Masada plateau is the anchoring location of the future city of Corbola, future approximately 7,000 years, 7,000 BC, 80 BC, not BC, 80, whatever. It says CE here, so I guess that's what it is. Oh dear. Well, anyway, which is the main entry point of the Templar matrix into this space-time dimension. Many of you will recall we did the 6th anchoring of a Templar node in Topanga, California, near LA back on 703. This goes into a lot of different things we're not going to go into here, but the city of Corbola at Masada, it's in the future, but now I realize it's in the future, as in just on the cusp of the new Earth. So we really can't go by time when we're talking about Corbola. It's kind of nebulous in that sense. And the Templar matrix is the most active matrix on the planet, if you don't include the one that covers everything now that's been developed probably since this was written, which is the Pyramidus radius, but that encompasses all the matrices. But the Templar still is present and still is very active. In 1997, we anchored one of the Templar nodes near the Kilauea, I can't say it, Kailua crater on the Big Island of Hawaii. Kailua crater. I don't know why I couldn't say that correctly. I'm sorry, everyone. While the process of Haleakala will not be a node anchoring, it will be an activation of the entire Templar matrix. Speaking in the past, because that was before I actually buried it. Now, after I wrote this, after we had buried the seals, from a recent Merkaba of the Host transmission I received, that's Thoth in his Merkaba, with the delivery of the 12 sealed lighted code papers to Haleakala, so the path is opened between the Hawaiian Maui future city of light associated with Haleakala, Hawaii, and the Sinai Dead Sea Corbola future city of light associated with Masada, Israel. The guardians of the house of the sun, Haleakala, await this arrival. They will open the gates for you. Once the spontaneous sacred process is complete, draw a circle, the sun, around what has been interred, and then open the circle facing west and east. This will create a corridor going from west to east and vice versa. Now, the opening of the seals. On June 7th, 2004, I and my companions, Estrella, who came all the way from Houston, Texas for this, someone I'm calling on here, who is a dear friend of mine, you'll see here in the video. Apparently she didn't want her name used, so I'm not putting it there. So I won't say it now. And Simeon climbed down through the mists and jungle ferns onto the rim of the Haleakala crater, the largest dormant volcano in the world. Bringing the sealed symbols from the Sinai to Haleakala through a linear passage of 15 years brought about powerful feelings of both completion and new beginnings for me. Well, now that's interesting because it took 15 years from the time the seal was sealed to the time we buried it. And it's now 17 years, more or less a month or 2 or 3, since those were, actually it's longer than, let me see, how long has it been? Oh dear, I'm not good at math, so it's not exactly that. It's sooner than that. It would be 2004. It would be about, gosh, wouldn't it be 15 years? 17 minus 2. That's 15 years. Wow. So if I'm correct here, and I'm not good at numbers, it was 15 years between the time they were buried and the time that we buried, the seal was buried and the papers were sealed and brought back to me. And between the time they were buried at Haleakala and the time they were just now buried, or a copy of them, this copy that you see here in Crestone. That I'm just now realizing, and that's really amazing. Okay, so let's continue. As we opened each seal to reveal the images, that we did right there before we were told to break the seal open right there on the mountain after we had the hole dug, and we opened them up. We photographed each one that you see as being photographed here. And then we closed it up again. We didn't reseal it, of course, but we folded the folded sheets, and put them into the crevice. So, as we opened each seal to reveal the images, which had been drawn in silver ink onto the blue handmade paper, I felt an incredible charge go through my body, yet centering profoundly in the heart. I knew then it was now time to understand more about these symbols and realize that their journey had only just begun. It has consequently been revealed to me that the 12 symbols which were given to me to transcribe upon the papers in 1989 are the Opah, meaning the sphere or circle of light that calls new creations into existence. The word is of the Aloe, which is the first language, first brought to the life of sound from the impulses of the brain in the most ancient days of Lemuria. Opah is the sound in its first forming out of the mouth of the Elohim, creation lords. This first forming is not sound. It is the etheric pattern that precedes the sound, the desire that is then made manifest in the word. The Opah is a spherical like a swirling bubble containing the etheric desire breath that proceeds into the second form, which is the manifest breath. As the Opah gathers intent through desire, so the sphere breath becomes more radiant with divine luminescence. When a human reaches into the heart seat of his/her being and touches that kernel of love and devotion to the godness of all things, so the Opah, the desire breath, is released. This is the beginning of a new creation in the universe. Seedling light veins are formed that connect to the Opah of many other souls. In this way, a body or star Merkaba will eventually form to shine forth in the heavens. The entire process is, of course, vast and complex in arrangement of its components, but this is the end result. The Elohim, or creation lords, are universal intelligences who are beyond what we understand as individual souls, for they incorporate soulness into a broader spectrum of awareness. Yet they are us, for we all create Opah that join together. The Elohim simply form deeper connections into the strands we offer them through the sacred geometry within the pulses of our DNA. As humanity moves closer to the center of the desire breath, so we become the new evolutionary level of creation lords, merging our soulness with a more expanded band of awareness. I just want to pause and say, this is all going on our planet. And of course, what I'm reading you here comes from my own inner attunements, experience. I never proclaim that this is it, it's what I'm receiving, and I believe it. It feels good to me, so I'm sharing it with you. But from that perspective, this and the many things that are going on this planet now, and then we look at what's going on in the news, and the elite are taking over, and we were all created from little ETs that came down and created us all, and we're their slaves, and we can't do anything about it, and on and on and on and on and on. Now, there are portions of truth in the situation, but it is so spinned to create a feeling of burden and depression, and that's all there is. Well, I'm here to tell you, if I know anything, I know we're creatures of light. We're beings of light. We got ourselves into some tight spaces, and we need to unravel that in our incarnational forms. But we are beings of light, and we will and are becoming the new Elohim for this world, and where it goes into the new earth spectrum. Okay, so I continue. The Opah symbols, then, are keynote triggers that can act upon our head brains and heart brains and quicken even deeper responses within the crystals of the DNA. They are intended to facilitate the desire breath for those who meditate with them. There are 12, for there are 12 movements of the desire breath and 12 main meridians that are stimulated in the DNA to create the Opah. These 12 meridians come out of the 12 crystalline geometries within the DNA, which in the Aloe language is called the IVI. That's capital I, little v, capital I. I choose to spell this with a capital I at both ends as I see the Aloe glyph. See the Aloe glyph for those crystalline geometries as IVI. The two columns, the I and the I on both ends of the little v, within the inverted open-ended triangle, V, is the center. The 12 IVI crystalline geometries, or crystals, are vibrating Merkabah thresholds of light, which form the creation patterns for our energy Merkabahs, inclusive of the physical body. As the IVI spin the connective threads, which at the meeting points are revealed to us as our human form and energy systems, so the desire breath is inhaled and exhaled by the whole being. The IVI and the Opah, then, are the key resonators for all life. Life not only as we witness it from this reality, but the complete energy light geometries of the living being from its point of divine inception as source. Now I will interject here that this 12 represents what we are receiving here in our experience. And were they originally 12? I think not. I think they were more. And when we integrate into the new Earth spectrum, at least the first stage of the new mesome, there will be 13. But this is additional information that I'm receiving now, and this was written, of course, in 2004. The purpose of creating a link on the planet between the Sinai Dead Sea and the Haleakala on Maui is significant, and I will touch upon it only briefly here. In essence, these two nodes on the planet contain major cities of light along the future timeline of Earth. As these 2 points receive the imprint of the Opah symbols, so they join forces in a new pattern of breath for the planet, opening the way to the 4444 Stargate. The 4444 Stargate is simply a term being used to signify the doorway to full realization of our true composition and beingness in the universe. To place the significance of the Opah seals into perspective, they could look differently than they do. The images chosen, however, were from the original Book of Breaths, or Hal Te Kale of Lemuria. These symbols were chosen by my illumined mentor, Thoth, as they have a powerful charge from the past association with the 12 movements of desire breath. Now I'm receiving now that in the near future, I'm going to create the New Earth versions, and there will be a 13th. And we're going to be working with those. But that could not be accomplished until the seals were reburied, you might say, here in Crestone. And we're going to get to that in just a moment. There is a footnote, and I think it's kind of important to read it, and I attached this footnote to the original article that I just read you. After having received and written this article on the Opah symbols, I was sent to a link on Earth Files, a link that is Earth Files article entitled Field Trip with Microbiologist Dan Burich, something like that. Sorry, Dan, I can't pronounce your name. To Frenchman Mountain, Nevada, copyright 2004 by Linda Moulton Howe, on which the following information was given. Dr. Dan hypothesizes in his Lotus model that programmed energy he calls Ganesh particles travel in light and can interact with common silicon dioxide quartz crystals the way radio signals interact with antennas. Dr. Dan states, it relates as a communication carrier from the other side, the void, if you will, to present-day living organisms. Basically, the silicon dioxide acts as an antenna, which, when enough particles are oriented in the correct fashion, hence the right-shaped crystal, it acts as an antenna and opens a void. The particles are emitted, and yes, in fact, they can motivate the production of life from pre-existing proteins. Now, I do not know whether or not they can motivate the production of life on their own. So we do not have the first life here. At least we do not have the data to support first life. But we have the data to support production of life from protein nacreous material. Now that's the end of the quote. And I say, I believe that the IVI crystalline geometries in the DNA are precursors of the Ganesh particles. The IVI being, as I stated, the key resonators for all life. Life not only as a witness, as what we witness it from this reality, but the complete energy light geometries of the light being from its point of divine inception at source. So the Ganesh particles and the IVI crystalline geometries are almost one and the same. It's kind of hard to separate them out. They aren't exactly one and the same. But the IVI crystalline geometries, which are not, that are the precursors of sound, send out what he's calling the Ganesh particles. And according to what I'm receiving now, they can create life on their own. And what he is seeing is just one stage of their interaction as they do that. So before we get to our Crestone unveiling, I'm going to go through some pictures here I found. This is our journey. And here we are on the Haleakala crater, on that day, that auspicious day just before V-Day of the Venus transit. Very primeval, as you can see, but a beautiful location. And here I am, those many years ago, a little bit more robust and a little bit younger, climbing around on the rocks. And here is my dear Estrella, having come all the way from Houston. She's the one who took the seal, the silver seal, and the papers, and went to Sinai and sealed those papers with the silver seal, buried the silver seal, and brought the sealed papers back to me. And it was she who would come with us to do this deed. And here we have Simeon and An standing there looking down at me. And she's from Maui, so she's the Maui girl. She still is. And here are the three of us ladies together. We look kind of chubby, but you know, we were just loaded with clothes, layered upon layer, because it was cold, even though it was perfectly warm down below. That's a high mountain, and it's always cold up there. And here's Estrella working on the hole, the place that we're going to bury it. And here are the seals. We've already opened them, but we folded them back and we placed them in the hole for the burial. And here are the crystals as they appeared over the buried seals, which of course we then buried those. And we're back to the seals again. And so finally we come to our little ceremony. It was very simple, pure, and beautiful. And this pole that you see here, this staff, this tower, was carved by Ray Pelletier, who lived here when I lived here before, and carved the center pole for the then Kalendara land that we had at the time, and our staffs. And he's been a very intrinsic part of mine and Simeon's life at the time we lived in Crestone. And he moved back again just a few months after I did. You can't see the beautiful carvings on this, but it is really magnificent. And you can see the ziggurat, just a tiny little dot in view way behind it there, so you get an idea of the distance. This is a closer up of the pole on the side, and there is the ziggurat. I've, zoomed it in. Now here we have laid out some of the things we brought to celebrate with. Keeper of the Way, you can see the large crystal, and I also brought Osiris. You can't see him in this picture. And there were things we were going to bury as well, things we were going to take back with us, but also things we were going to bury. Here we are, the hole has been dug, and we see people gathering around to place the crystals and things within the chamber. And here they are. You can see I've photocopied a sheet of the copy of the sacred symbols. Of course, they were much bigger than that, and they're sealed pieces, but I received it was okay just to do a template of them here, which I did. And there's a little crystal on top there. That crystal skull is one of several that I've had that have been charged with the matrix of the altar here, the hosting skulls. And there's some other crystals and pieces, including a little shell I buried there that came from the Red Sea, which is the closest I could get to Masada. I know I must have stones from Masada, but I'm not exactly sure where they are. So I placed that little shell there. And other people placed some very sacred crystals, some things they were, they were really sacrificing, letting go of to put in this chamber. We had a little celebration. And the final prayer and sealing. You see Ray is foremost holding a staff there, and William Bueller with the hat, bowed head, and the little scarf hanging from his staff. All of these have been carved by Ray, and Edie is next to him. And then Celeste going right is there, and just a little bit of Katrina, and Michael can be seen over Ray's shoulder, the bearded fellow. So we're all together there. And here I placed the Osiris hosting skull atop the copper plate that is engraved. That was one of three. It was the main one that I was instructed to have engraved in 1973 to take to the top of Teotihuacan for a very special ceremony. A whole long story on that, but I was asked to bring it, so I know that means there's a connection, obviously. This wasn't left, nor was the skull, but we put it on top of there for a final sealing of the whole chamber. And then I forgot to put in Helios's feather. We had two doves when we lived here, Helios and Vesta, and we gave Helios away because it turned out to be both males, and they were fighting all over the place, the doves apiece. Once Vesta was gone, Helios just calmed right down. He was a sweet little chickadee again. And so this is one of his feathers, and I meant to bury it, but I guess it was intended to be stuck in the ground, so that's what I did. When I took the skull and the circle off, I put the feather there. Here's a little group shot of all of us together, except for Michael, who was taking the picture. But you can see the ziggurat behind us. Now, I'm hoping that you can see these pictures on this. All of a sudden, it occurred to me that if I don't do a different share every time, you might not be able to see them. So if you can't see the little slideshow pictures, I really apologize, but I simply cannot do this over again and to try to figure out how to do that because I'm using Zoomcast and you can't just edit it very well. I use it because it uploads so fast. Anyway, I'm just hoping that you can see all of the pictures. But the main thing is this telling of the story, and I'm sure you've seen most of it. So that said, my dears, I think I'm going to conclude this. I don't want it to be too long, but there was a lot I wanted to cover. I will say, in conclusion, again, that I do plan to do more work with the Opah now to create the new Earth version symbols and a program or a means to work with them now in this time period. And perhaps there'll be some more coming forth as I do all of that, and I'll be wanting to share with you as well. There probably will be. But for now, I say goodbye to all and many happy trails.